Hi folks, in the back of the ute again. I'm at the Oasis with Kim and Angus Deans, and they very kindly showed me around the property, so I've got to learn loads, and I really wish I'd put the mic on them at the very beginning as soon as I walked through the door, because we have covered so much good stuff. But I'm going to try and bring what we have discussed into the back of the ute so we can share it. One of the first, welcome to the back of the ute.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to the Oasis.
Yeah, it's been amazing. My one sticking point at the moment is, should I add the stuff that I believe my soil needs in the form of powders and pellets and things like that, or should I start looking at maybe species of plants, because we did trip over some clover, and I went down that linear way of going clover, oh, calcium, oh. So what should I do? How should I be thinking?
I guess it always depends, doesn't it? Is often our standard answer, that, you know, there's a time and a place for inputs, but yeah, it's often the management first. So yeah, what's nature going to do for you for free? And can that work? That's often where we go first, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, my first place would have been to have gone with the language, should.
Yeah.
You know, because I go to what spaces are we looking to fill when we perceive that there's something wrong with it? Is it that it's not productive enough? What is it that we're actually, what need are we really trying to meet?
Yeah.
And is that our perception of it not being productive enough? Is that our concern about our peers' perception of it not being productive enough?
And should is one word we all need to change to could. I've tried to take should out of my vocabulary as best I can. And if I hear it, I go could instead of should. Could I do this or could I do that? Because shoulds are just, it often keeps us disempowered in any space, even when it comes to our soil.
So it's more about that limiting factor then.
Yeah.
Just even the vocabulary that we're using.
Yeah. And us imposing limitations on ourselves and what we're expecting of our soil. You know, when we perceive that it's lacking in something and it's not performing, that's the message we're sending to it.
Yeah, it's not
it's
broken.
It's lacking in and it's not performing. I personally, and I'm not advocating this as a rule for everyone else, I personally struggle with the idea that we just add the limiting input because we just run slap bang into the next limiting input. And I think that leads us to getting on a treadmill that there is no getting off of. One of the things that's occurred to me, that's happened to me over the years, watching and working with poor soils and good soils, is we sometimes make less stress for ourselves by learning to work within the capability of our soils and enhancing that. So don't expect, in our instance, a supposedly poor granite soil to function like a basalt soil.
Yeah.
And stop trying to turn it into that. Don't go, oh, it just needs fertilisers, it just needs, it just needs... No, because when the wheels fall off of things, when the climate's not perfect, all the rest of it, that's not how it performs, even in the presence of those things.
But it is interesting because in all the soils work we do, I think people's focus is on inputs, and we've been conditioned to buy the fixes to our problems for eons, but actually where the base of the cause of the matter is always management, and it's always photosynthesis and ground cover, and how are we managing the grazing animals in the landscape, or the photosynthesizing plants in the ground cover, because it can't fix the soil without photosynthesis. So it's often we're training people to come back to the management. We'll go to do a soil visit, and instead of fertilisers, we're talking grazing management, because that's really the foundation. If you don't address the foundation, you're on an input treadmill, which is great to make profit for multinational companies, but it's not great for healing landscapes or, you know, viable businesses and all the rest of it. But I guess this all came up, didn't it? Because we were walking around and we were showing Tamsin our grazing management, and how when we came here we were determined to improve our soil without inputs. We were grazing only, and then we got into some biodynamics, and that's been our journey pretty much. And then a little bit of biology in the more recent times, but the foundation was the grazing, and that's what has made the difference.
And so how many years did it take before you could noticeably see a difference?
7, you reckon?
I believe Andre Lou's often said there's 7 years of being in organics before you see things really start sort of exponentially increasing. That probably was so in our experience, but then we started in a very limited space. We had really inadequate fencing. We had poor control of grazing for a start, and seasonal conditions have a big influence on it, you know, and we did go through some tough times. There's not a rule of thumb to that. We could have done it quicker if we'd have had the ability to fence quicker and done things like that. If we'd had 3 years like the last 3 where it continues to keep raining, we could have done it quicker, you know, but it's...
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's, you know, even you can say there's a time frame to how long before it might happen, but I was just thinking too, in the space of talking about grazing in this space, we're missing out on the cropping side of things as well. So Kim was touching on the photosynthesis. How do we manage and maximise that? For those people who aren't doing any grazing, we've got to consider the same again. It's are we keeping our soil alive and thriving, or are we not? And that doesn't have to be a multi-species cover crop. It can be as simple as sometimes letting the weeds grow.
I'm encouraging people to have a let it grow area where you just let it grow. You decide to take out a patch that you can afford to take out and let things grow, let nature heal it, and watch and learn, because you learn about plant succession. You don't get a chance to see that in action until you stop killing things. So have the let it grow area and just let nature teach you, and start to get in contact with that area and see what happens, and look at the soil. It's a great place to compare soil health as well, when that's the let it grow area. Anything that wants to grow is allowed to grow. And how long before that soil is improved enough for you to be able to use minimal inputs? That's a really great way to start. Or even just having let it grow areas throughout the place, just to start to learn, because until we can see it and experience it, it's just an idea. It's not embodied in our system at all. So. And I get the financial reality is that sometimes people are in a system to survive, but you can still find a let it grow patch. That's what I call it. Just have a let it grow paddock, find it, use it.
So you touched on something which has intrigued me, because in my chaotic garden that I'm trying to make, well, it can be chaotic, that's fine, but productive, and I've used that word make, and I know Angus is looking at me going, oh, the vocabulary. But I'm growing, or the raspberries and chamomile are successfully growing, and what you were saying to me was they're actually telling me something, what I need, and we've got to look it up on that book though.
We do, I'll have to do that before you go. Yeah, because the plants that grow in our environment are there because they're needed by the soil and by us. So often, herbalists have taught me that if a plant is growing around you, it's probably because you need it. Like particularly things like dandelion, or a lot of things we've been calling weeds, they're herbs and they're medicinal, and they're good for us, they're good for our livestock, they're good for our soil, they're healing us on every level. So starting to pay attention to that and then tracing that back to how does that heal soil, plants, us, animals, it's really interesting. Yeah.
And you can go down a rabbit hole and make that really linear. Oh, it's because it accumulates this mineral or whatever. But it's more than that. Plants and living systems are not just a function of the chemistry that's in them. And this is something I'd love people to understand. They are a living system. I've got a client who, an agronomist, had said, oh, you need to spray the weeds in this paddock that was going into sorghum, and she said, I've been riding over it and there's nothing there worth doing, a little bit of fleabane and a little bit of ryegrass. And I said, well, what's the fleabane telling you? And then fleabane's about accumulating potassium. So particularly in a bare fallow style situation, the potassium's very leachable, it's going to be washed from the soil profile, you lose it. Fleabane sucks it up, keeps it in a bioavailable form in the soil that's then available as that breaks down, for your plants to have access to. let's start looking at what they're asking us to do or telling us isn't happening. You know, one of the greatest ways to keep potassium available and cycling in our soils is with fibrous grassroots. They also are a massive potassium accumulator. So we've got to be a fellow that's saying you're losing your potassium, the most expensive mineral we can apply.
And nature's cycling it for free.
Do we need to consider doing a different method, you know, to hang on to this and keep it cycling?
Yeah, and it is so much fun to look at a plant though and start to get to know its, I guess its personality almost, and what its attributes are. And then for you with your chamomile and raspberries, to delve into that, there'll be a lot of magic in what they're there to do, and to watch them and how long they come through and do the job. After we were burnt in 2019, we had fleabane everywhere. Now you don't see much of it, only in bare ground areas now, but it came in, it did its job, the next year it was gone. And you know, you can panic about it, but at the end of the day, it was there healing the soil and part of a successional process, and it'll come and go as it's needed. Nature's so intelligent, isn't it? Nature, I've only been contemplating, I was telling you, Tams, and how I've been saying, you know, we grow soil and we grow food and we grow the regenerative capacity of people, and then I realised it was kind of arrogant to say that, because I watched a video where the person was explaining how she doesn't grow beans. She creates the conditions for the beans to grow. And that really, the penny dropped, and I went, yeah, we're actually stewarding the system and creating the conditions for growth, because in nature, things grow when the conditions, are, you know, whatever the conditions are what dictates the growth. So it's inherent growth. It's feeding off the conditions. So we don't actually grow anything. We create conditions for what's growing. So if we've got weeds, we've created the conditions for those weeds to grow in. And then we're trying to kill them to create more conditions for more weeds to grow in. And it's like, what are we creating the conditions for what to grow? And also for ourselves to grow, isn't it? Like, it was really cool, a moment of awareness, and I've been really humbled by that, rather than thinking I grow these things, that actually nature's built-in capacities to grow. We just got to get out of the way.
I've had that very similar experience with all these bush turkeys, because they just took over my big lump of soil that was going to go onto the market garden, but they composted it for me. They brought in everything, and then the eggs that didn't hatch, I mean, I presume they've got sulphur and things in, all that decaying, and the microbes moved in to eat, because there wasn't any chicks inside the eggs. It looked like a fossil, but it had soil in it. It was blown away, and it was just, well, the bush turkeys are here to help me. Even though I felt, because they're digging everything, they're hindering me. And I move dirt and they move it back, and I was just like, right, this has got to stop. But they've moved on. They've gone somewhere else now, because they've helped me. And so that moves on to that more spiritual and energetic level that I know, Angus, you really perform well at.
Well, I just think in terms of, as you talked about that, and you've described your soil to us as being quite tight and clay-like. So we need aeration, you know, and that's a function they're performing. They accumulate organic matter. You'd thankfully done it for them, make it easy, give them a head start, you know, and they utilise it, and then they spread it around. What are they doing? They're creating aeration, and they're spreading biology, you know, and so the clues are in all of this. If we have a tight soil, what is the fix? We can fix it with steel. We can fix it with biology. Now, steel is temporary. Biology is long-lasting. So what do we choose to do? If we go with the whole thing of biology, you know, and many people are going to be experiencing it this year because of, well, and have done over the last couple of years, because of the prolonged rainfall events we've had and the flooding events we've had. There's going to be so much of this. The air is short of oxygen. The soil is short of oxygen, you know. There's going to be so many things happening in soil. Is that also true of us as the caretakers of our land? We're short of oxygen, you know. We've just come through a time with a virus. Whoops, I maybe shouldn't do the rabbit ears thing. with a virus that affects respiratory
aeration
functions, you know. Are we breathing properly?
Most of us aren't.
Most of us aren't.
There's so many parallels between us and our soil and our landscapes, aren't there?
Yeah.
It's what's happening within us.
Yeah.
And so not only is there an issue for it, but there's an issue for us. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? We can deal with ours, and maybe we relieve the land of the responsibility of showing us that. And so it's dealt with. And
So do you think we've manifested, take away all the conspiracy theories, do you think we've manifested these floods?
I believe that's rough to say, because there are people who will feel they're a victim of it. We haven't manifested the floods. We are making the conditions that are conducive to flooding. So over the years, with our consistent degrading of soils and the capacity of them to absorb moisture, and if they can absorb moisture, they can also take an air, we've aggravated the runoff.
Yeah.
Many people are living on floodplains. It was the choice land, you know, so we've seemed to have aggravated the scale of the problem.
The way I like to explain it, and it's something I always explain teaching when I teach farm planning courses, is that Mother Nature throws enough extremes at us. Why we shouldn't be trying to make them worse. We should be showing how can we moderate this, which starts with soil carbon, and it starts with the water cycle and healing that. Because I don't think we're not going to experience the extremes, especially in Australia, but we can certainly make them worse.
Yeah.
So it's really about how do we not make those things worse, and how can we absorb every drop of rain that falls, and slow the flow and capture the water and heal the water cycle in our landscapes that we steward, I think, so we don't make it worse. Because we are going to experience climate variability, but we definitely can make that more extreme. We can go into drought quicker and flood quicker based on how we manage land, and how we interact with land and soils particularly. So yeah, I think that's how I like to sort of put it to people. We don't need to make this worse.
No. But I think with Mother Nature throwing the fires at us first and then the water, I think there's a real something's going on there. And I know that you sort of explained and described what she was trying to do, and it's just too much of a coincidence, and I don't believe in coincidences.
From that purely spiritual point of view, and my time sitting with it, I journeyed with fire in the space of the fires, and I understood the intent of fire was to bring awareness of what was happening to our environment, to the people in our coastal cities where the majority of people live, who were largely unaffected by what's happening in our climate, by virtue of the fact they largely live in air-conditioned conditions. So where farmers and people out in the land and rural areas see what's happening with climate variability, a lot of people live with a lack of awareness of it. So the fire indicated to me that it was bringing the message that things needed to change. And it was through the smoke and through fire threatening cities and major townships that people became aware of there's something, our environment is hurting. And so when I look at the flooding since, and it's been extreme, I mean, I keep waiting for some old people to say, oh, it's just like it, we've gone back to how it used to be, thinking, wow, because I'm enjoying the rain in our high country position.
Yes.
Is this a cleansing, like the fact it's gone on for nearly 3 years for many of us, has given us a chance to heal from the drought of 2019, 2020. Or up till up to the start of 2020. It's given our landscape a chance to recover, but it's also given us a chance to create new beginnings. So there's been a washing through of energies, a washing through of, irrigating, let's think in terms of irrigating. If we had a wound that was being irrigated, it's about flushing out dross and
cleansing,
that's the word. So is this asking us to cleanse, take a deep breath, because we need a deep breath, our land is waterlogged, and it needs the deep breath, and go, how do we work with our landscape, with our own spiritual way of being, with our own intelligence, to change what we're doing, and bring it back to life. How do we support life? You know, and life isn't just having a job, being able to pay the bills. Life is about existing in a creative space. You know, how do I'll touch on something a little touchy here, but you know, for years I struggled with man is made in the image of God. And I'm not religious, and I'm not knocking those people who are religious, but I struggle with this for a long time because I go, well, God's pretty confused. You know, it's male, it's female, it's black, it's white, it's, you know, short, it's tall, it's skinny, it's fat. And then I got it one day, and we are made in the image of God because we are made with a creative capacity. And it's our duty to create. So, you know, create heaven on earth. Why not?
Yeah.
And all the time we've just been invited to that dance.
Yeah.
How does it get better than this? You know, that's a question that guides us constantly.
Yeah.
How does it get better than this? What imaginings can I come up with? What insights can I come up with? And you try them, and then you see what happens.
And we also need to be mindful of our focus, don't we? Like, are we focusing on problems to solve? Because most of the time when I work with people, I'm there to solve a problem. And I often say, what's working well? And it completely throws them. I love watching people. You're meant to help with my problems. You want to know what's working well. And I do. But it is about, we've got to, what are we focusing? You know, we often say here we don't have weeds. They're plants and they're indicators, and they're here for whatever reason, you know. So starting to question the words we use and how we focus our time and energy. And you know, I know personally I much prefer to think about how can we bring things to life than what can I kill today, you know. So but even being aware that we're thinking like that, we sometimes so in that thought process we're not aware that we're in we've just got this huge negativity bias of what's our problem today, you know. What's working well today, you know. And that one question, if we remember to ask ourselves each day what's worked well, we could help flip our own way of seeing our lands and our business and ourselves completely differently, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just that one question, and we can ask ourselves if no one else is going to throw it at us.
Yeah.
And our busyness.
Yeah.
You know, I'll never forget stopping chipping thistles and allowing them to do their thing, and they only exist in a space for 2 years because their job's done now.
Yeah.
And they might pop up over there because it needs some help, you know. The calcium processes aren't happening properly, so it's going deep in search of calcium. That deep tap root's aerating the soil when it breaks down, and the calcium processes are the processes of decay.
Well,
it's saying stay off, you know. I'm the prickly surface, and I'm going to put all this high carbon, sort of carbonaceous material here for some fungal activity to get happening.
Well, that's the other thing, because people then want nicer ways to kill the thistles.
Yeah.
So then they'll go, can you tell me what minerals to give it? And it's like, because they're wanting a nicer way to kill it. And I've heard of people get the minerals, not put them out, and the thistles have gone anyway. So don't think that, you know, even if you're going to find a nicer way to kill a plant, because it's not a weed, a plant that you don't want, always leave a bit. Whether that's a mineral, whether that's a chemical, whether that's whatever you're choosing to use to move that plant on, leave an area, because you might not have needed that mineral. That plant might have done its job and moved on anyway. And unless you leave something, you don't know. You just think it's the mineral. But it's not always that. Like sometimes we're just impatient and we're not letting nature we're not trusting the natural process of succession in nature, because in nature nothing stays the same.
No.
The fire taught me that. I was sitting here in the garden looking at where plants had been and quite upset, and then I went, but who am I to say that how nature should be? Nature's always changing and evolving. It never, you know, it's not meant to stay the same. And I think we get impatient and think, well, we want this plant gone, but was it just coming through and moving through slowly? What time frame is it on? Sometimes their time frame is a little longer than we'd like, but you know, and those tools are still there. They're not, you shouldn't not use them if you want to, but be mindful, because you might not have needed it. And it's like, you might have been going to go anyway, and how would you know if you don't let something grow and see?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
of course, being in this area rather than Queensland, there's been a lot of roses, and I've been walking to restaurants and cafes and things as I've been travelling around, and there's so many roses growing, and I have taken the time to stop and smell the roses.
Yay.
And so when you're talking, I'm just like, oh, that's so relatable, because we have to slow down.
Yeah, we want, like, I guess that we've come through a society that wants the quick fix in everything, don't we? Like, whatever that might be.
I'd be mindful too. And I'll challenge you on that, Tams, and there's an awful lot of people don't want to slow down, because if they slow down, they might run into themselves. And who is that?
Our busyness is our drug of choice, and I've definitely played that game.
We all played that game.
My drug of choice was the treadmill of busy for a while.
Escapism.
And it's really condoned and celebrated.
Yes.
I had
Keep running.
people say, they'd run into me and go, oh, how are you? I bet you're busy. No, I'm not doing busy anymore. But it was celebrated. That was, if you're busy, you're important, or you're successful, or
you're contributing.
You're making a difference. You're whatever. And I now say my goal is not to be busy, it's to be effective, but also, not busy. It doesn't mean that doesn't happen at times, but I don't want that to be the constancy.
Well, just watching you, Tamsin, talk about stopping and smelling the roses. Watch the energy change in your face and your body language. We need a bit more of that, because most people are running in the space of exhaustion. You know?
Absolutely.
And if it's as simple as stopping and smelling the roses, bring it on.
Plant more roses.
Angus won't let us do that. He doesn't like roses.
Well, any flower,
But it is stop and appreciate the nature's beauty that's all around you. And even the what we call weeds. So I said we don't have weeds here, but they're beautiful plants. If you actually stop and, I think, just relate to them and look at what they're doing, dig them up, and get to know the plant or not, because you're not allowed to dig holes here either. And if you do, you put it back.
Probably water it, because it's hard enough to grow.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that? We've covered a lot. It's been
I'm
really
really
good.
excited to talk to you, Tamsin, because I've been wanting to record a chat with the wisdom of Angus involved in it for a while, and he ducks and dodges.
You need one of these, because they are brilliant, and you can just slide it on and let him go. Hours of conversation. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and like, we could sit in the back of you all day, really, and get sunburnt.
Starting to catch us.
The shade's gone, but anyway, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tamsin. Too good.
Well done, guys.
That was cool fun.
So much of what we've already talked about.
We did well.
I love the fact that you're prepared to go to the spiritual.
Yes.
Oh, really?